Alice Soper wrote a powerful column in the New Zealand Herald this week about the sidelining of female coaches in rugby. She didn't want to.
I'm saying all of this stuff because I want so desperately to stop writing about it.
And it's not just in rugby.
Well, the White Ferns have all male coaches, the Black Ferns too, and the Football Ferns have Michael Main after Jitka Klimkova stood down with 3 years left on her contract. The Kiwi Ferns coach is Ricky Henry, who is a man. The Black Sticks have 3 male coaches, and our top cyclists are all coached by men. All of our coaches at Rowing New Zealand are men, and our Olympic kayak champions are coached by Gordy Walker.
I'm Alexia Russell, and today on The Detail, where are the coaching women?
This is the problem. There's been a shift in women in leadership in sport in New Zealand, but not a shift in women in coaching.
I asked Locker Room founding editor Suzanne McFadden why we haven't made that change.
I think it's purely tradition. And I think that female athletes are very much used to being coached by male coaches, especially at the elite level. And I think that female athletes actually have a part to play in the appointment of coaches, of female coaches too. You know, a lot of them, it's what they're used to. They don't know any different. And yet, interestingly, some of these women will choose to be coaches once their playing days are over. So I think they have to also see that they have a responsibility in changing this situation too.
In a Substack article, Alice Soper called it the grass ceiling.
So often, we get caught up in the good news. There's a toxic positivity that's attached to a lot of women's sports stuff, which is mate, I would love to be here just talking about how awesome stuff is, because I love this game so much and so many parts of it are. But the thing is that if our structures aren't supporting it to be as awesome as it is, I'm going to keep saying that.
And in spite of the joy of this, and the delight of this,
the most storied, successful team in women's rugby history. Gold medalists for the second time, New Zealand.
She says women's rugby is going backwards in its development.
Women first played rugby in the 1800s in New Zealand, right? We have played since men played in New Zealand. We were first paid to play in 1891. We, first had inter-provincial games in the 1920s. It's been recognised and sanctioned. That's the word, right? It's been sanctioned by New Zealand rugby since the 90s, but it's existed a long time before that. And when it did exist for all that time, who do you think was leading women? Women were. So in a weird way, I actually think we've gone backwards. I think about where we were at the 90s and understanding that piece that we were all playing an ecosystem, that understanding that it's not just about developing players, it's also about developing coaches, referees, media managers themselves for those teams. All of these pieces were required in order to make something thrive. And we're now asking permission for all of it. And I wonder why we bothered. I wonder why we bothered ever teaming up with the men when they've actually been the roadblock to our success in the last, 20, 30 years. Because I think if we kept going on our own, we'd done a lot at that point. We'd gone to a World Cup in 91 that was not sanctioned, that our players had to fundraise $5,000 each in 1991. So that's more money by today's standards to go and represent us. They did that on their own. So I don't know. I don't know if we are I think we've gone backwards, and I can see that even within my club scene, right? We're down to a record low of participating club teams. We have seven this year. I've played in this club competition when we've had 12. So, I don't know. I think we've got a lot better at this thing of getting people in the door, but we've still got a conveyor belt going to nowhere. So we've got really good at level ones. I need to break into that in terms of coaching. I need to break into that data in terms of participation, because what we have seen for women and girls is a big uptick in festivals. Festivals are one-offs. They're not people getting involved with their club. They're not people, doing season on season. So we can bump up again those numbers, make them look good. But are they lasting? What are our retention data in all of this? What is our retention data and player base and coaching base and whoever? How are we keeping people sticky to the game? Because we need people to stick around if we want to grow it.
And that's not happening.
I don't think so. I see like I say, the number of people, by the time they retire, they're burnt out. They're so burnt out of having to advocate for respect, having to advocate for the game to love them back in the way that they love it. I hate to sound so negative on here, but for goodness sake, when I'm looking at all the data and all the trends are going backwards, it's hard to look at that and be excited. It's hard to look at that and be excited when my solution that's offered to me is more step one, ground one. I need to see like the whole path. So when you sell me level 1, let me know when the data's for level 2. Let me know when the data's for level 3. Show me that you see me stepping up all of these ladders. Because if you don't, like, what's going on? You see this keep happening within a number of our coaches. They go to Japan. There is a really high, churn of players that are passionate about coaching. They're not here. They're having to go overseas in order to develop themselves. And then we miss out because our best and our most ambitious in the game are not in our own country because they cannot climb the ladder here.
Alice describes herself as a rugby player and human firework and a staunch advocate for getting women over the advantage line. That includes getting them and herself into coaching, and at higher levels than the Nainai College schoolgirls she used to take. At the moment, that's a Herculean task.
I've seen a lot targeted at women in coaching at this kind of grassroots, because that's obviously where you start. Frequent offers of what is the level 1. Now, level 1 is very basic. You can do it in an evening session. It's an overview of what the game of rugby is. So chances are, if you've played for a minute, you've probably got that handle on it. But to go through and get that first step, that usually takes about one evening to clock over. It's the level 2 where you start to actually have to, put some of those principles of play into practice. And then level 3 is when you actually get to start to look at kind of more of the high performance aspect of it. And it's incredibly tough to get onto a level 3 course. That was the whittle that I put down to New Zealand Rugby when I was lucky enough to be part of the Ako Wahine program, which provided me a certification as a world rugby coach educator. And I said to them, look, how do I get onto a level 3? And the story there is you have to be nominated through your union, which requires a couple of things. A, that there aren't people higher than you on the wait list, which there absolutely is, and B, a very friendly relationship with your union, which if you are a staunch advocate such as myself, they might be less inclined to get behind a nomination and put me up further to progress within the system. So already you're starting to hit glass ceilings, just to make, the next logical step if you're wanting to aspire for more.
So it seems to me that there is the broad, very low level, come and learn how to coach the, the low level things, but then there's a big blockage when you're wanting to go further. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely right. Like it's the reality is it's much more labour intensive to provide even a level 2 qualification. And so, we've seen, obviously, it's no secret, rugby is in bad financial shape across this country. So as you are maybe not hitting the financial targets that you need to, the ways that you can still be looking like you're ticking the boxes is to be delivering that level 1. And, we've seen that most recently with the Ako Wahine program, which has basically been rebranded to deliver level 1. Well, we already had that. So I don't understand why we need to repurpose a program that had been more or less a success. If you look at a number of the just retired Black Ferns, they had been through that process. A number of women that had taken up a position within the first step, which is, that Whareparma Cup, they had been in contact with the Ako Wahine program. And so now that is just going back to step 1 and we're getting resourced. Well, we already had it. So it's kind of the mind boggles as to what the actual plan is here, because I don't see one. I cannot get beyond where I already am unless I am willing to pay thousands of dollars, and would have to. I don't even know where I would find that. You've seen it a number of times with high profile women in our sport. A coach, say, for example, like Anna Richards, who's a 4-time World Cup winner, who's a World Rugby Hall of Famer, who had to go to Hong Kong in order to get her coaching certification because she could not get supported to get that qualification here. So, there's quite obviously an issue. That's just to get the certification. That's before we ever get to applications to run teams. That's before we ever get to progression and development of these people in these positions, climbing up. If you look at the number of women that are currently in high performance pathways for women in rugby, 75% are assistants. So we're only giving 25% of those women that are currently coaching head coaching roles, and that number is set to decrease. That number was based on this year, where we still had 3 wahine that were essentially the head coaches across Super Rugby Aupiki. We now have 1. So we're going backwards, and we're going backwards quick. And of course we are, because it's become professionalism, and that mirrors the trend that we've seen, both within our sport and globally, that as soon as our sport becomes professional, it becomes more attractive for men to further their careers too. So they get to have the double dip. They can develop themselves either within the women's game or the men's game, whereas women are still fighting to be taken and given respect with even their own part of the game before they could ever consider coaching within men.
Is there no such thing anymore as just someone being very good at analytically, very good with people, they can see the game plays, they can read the game, and they just sort of morph into coaching? That doesn't happen anymore in the professional age?
I mean, it does definitely at grassroots. Like, there's so many of us that don't have certs. Like, I've coached alongside women that I don't believe, I think maybe have their level 1, but that's, as far as they've gone, because they honestly don't need to, because at this stage, that's what they're interested in. But the problem is like, if you start to then build a track record, and you've obviously become one of those people, like you've just said, that has a natural instinct that is fantastic at this stuff, that is the price of entry. If you want to progress beyond, you have to have those pieces of paper now. Now that there is, expectation of professionalism, there is also, with that comes a requirement for the right pieces of paper. So if we're doing that, it's like there obviously needs to be a push to just be pushing women as quickly through that pipeline as you can. I do not understand this rebrand. We don't need more juniors getting involved in level 1s. I've been offered that course for at least once a season for the past 5 years. I do not need to do my level 1s anymore. Please do not insult my intelligence and let me go and refresh again on principles of play. I've been doing principle of play for 21 years. Wow. Give me something more.
If you did get entrance to do this qualification, how much would it cost and how long does it take?
So in terms of the level 3, it depends. So if I'm nominated through union, then I don't have to pay. If I have to pay myself, it'd be, I think it's 1,000 odd. I would have to go and check that. But if I'm ticked off by the system, then I don't have to pay for that. But there is a commitment of time.
What does the sisterhood think of this, Alice? I mean, in terms of both players wanting better coaching and in terms of senior players wanting to take this further.
It's pretty frustrating to continue to see men take our jobs. I'll just say that, right? And it's pretty frustrating to see this continue happening. We had all of these vacancies between last Aupiki season and this one coming up, and all bar one were filled by a man. And the only one that wasn't was an intentional move, I know, from the woman that had vacated that role to Awhi and support the woman that has taken over, to put her in a position to say this is the best person for the job. So it took that, climbing that ladder and then reaching back and pulling someone else in.
There's men wanting to do this job. I mean, did they see it as a stepping stone to something that they might consider to be better?
A number of them do. Better is a question, because you see a lot of ladder hop. So you might have failed in your own rising within the men's game, so you fail over into women. I mean, we saw that, right? There was a Black Ferns coach who was reviewed out of his position. Prior to that, he'd been fired from his Super Rugby job because he'd been found not up to scratch, and then he was given a Black Ferns head coaching gig. What is that if not failing upwards, and that's the thing, right? We are still putting more weight on experiences within men's games. So if you are a failed Super Rugby men's coach, your skill set is deemed higher than a successful women's Whare Palmer Cup coach. That's mad. because there's like so much in terms of, look, everyone goes on and on. They're like, what's the difference between coaching women and coaching men? Blah, blah, blah. There's not a lot actually in terms of the difference, but what the real difference is the system that you are supporting these players to navigate through. And while those systems are still not really set up for women, you are going to be having to teach them a lot more resilience, a lot more, that it's going to have to be them that drives their progress. And so that's the fundamental difference between coaching women and men at this stage, is because our pathways are not as assured. So you see that, like I say, as players, the same is true in terms of women. We've seen so many players that have become coaches that have hung out at assistant level at Whaarapama Cup for years, and they have applied for head coach roles, and they continue to be overlooked for a bloke that might have won a premiership at club level for men. So I'd say with men, it's the old classic, it doesn't matter what type of ally you're trying to be, you should always step beside and behind if you're wanting to be an ally, not in front. If you're wanting to be an ally and you're wanting to contribute your skills as a male coach within the women's game, be a good assistant, be a good mentor. Do not take the head coaching positions.
Sir Graham Henry once hailed him as the most outstanding New Zealand rugby coach in 120 years. Sir Wayne Smith, of course, orchestrated a remarkable turnaround for our Black Ferns, guiding them to a World Cup win on home soil.
On the other hand, if someone like Wayne Smith puts his hands up and says, I'll take on the Black Ferns, you wouldn't say no, would you?
I would.
Would you?
To be honest with you, I would. I didn't want him to take the Black Ferns last time. I wanted him to come in there as a mentor and bring more women into the space. That's what I want from these men in the game. Don't take it for yourself. Give it. Don't take. Give. Like they talk about, they're giving back to the game. Are they? Because you left and where were more women? Before Wayne turned up, we had a woman involved in the coaching setup. She was one of the assistants. He left. We have no women in the Black Ferns environment now.
Yeah, I would say it's probably one of the best projects of my life, most exciting anyway. We became a high quality, high performance team.
He has really given women's rugby, a real lift, and quite openly says that, coaching women was the most enjoyable part of his career, which is fantastic.
Here's Suzanne McFadden again.
But why didn't the woman who was in that coaching team, Whitney Hansen, why wasn't she given the opportunity to step up into that head coach role once Sir Wayne Smith had stepped down? I don't think they needed to explain it. They just said that, they were looking for a new coach, and Alan Bunting had a previously strong record coaching women in the seven space, and that he would be the best person for the job. But again, how do women get that experience without being given a lift up?
And yet, when we think about sport coaching over the last couple of years, so many male coaches have been in the firing line for inappropriate behaviour or bullying, or the allegations have flown. I mean, canoe racing, cycling, gymnastics, football, the list goes on. How much of this do our athletes have to endure before they say, actually, what about we put a woman in charge?
Yeah, I'd love to know the answer to that too. I guess they maybe see it as there are some bad eggs out there, and unfortunately they chose the wrong people for those roles, and there are good male coaches out there. But surely women's coaches have a better understanding of the female athlete, of what they go through, not only physically, but, with their menstrual cycles. Emotionally, they're different than male athletes. Surely women understand this better than anyone else. So I would love for sports to look at why that's happening, why these male coaches, and this isn't just obviously in New Zealand, it's across the world, why a lot of male coaches who are coaching women's teams are being pulled up for inappropriate behaviour. But then the cycle doesn't seem to be broken.
Critics would point to the fact that the Football Ferns coach, Jitla Klimkova, also left after inappropriate behaviour, and she's been replaced by a man, Michael Main.
Yeah. They look at it as an individual situation, rather than saying, well, the sex of this person is this, does that make them a better coach or not better coach? They look at their CV and say, well, this is the best person for the job. But how are women supposed to reach that point if they're not given the stepping stones to get there?
Is it still perceived when a women's rugby team, for example, gets a male coach that they're lucky to have a man come over and coach them?
It seems to be the case, and it's through not only the sports but through the public, the audiences, the fans seem to in some ways expect that a man takes the job because they know more than a woman. And we all know that's not true, but there's those traditional perceptions that still exist, and they really need to be broken.
New Zealand.
Suze, a great deal of effort has been made to balance the genders at Olympics. So what is the situation with Olympic coaching?
That's still way behind, especially in New Zealand. 11% of the New Zealand coaches who went to the Paris Olympics and Paralympics for New Zealand were women. I mean, it's a leap up from the last Olympics and Paralympics when it was only 8%. But of that 11% of New Zealand coaches, only 2/3 of them are actually based in New Zealand. So that's, not necessarily New Zealand women who have been given that opportunity.
In New Zealand, what pathways can women follow to coach at an level? Is there a generalised initiative that help them get to where they want to go?
Yeah, it all started with a Women in High Performance Sport pilot program that came in 2018. The government pledged $2.7 million to try and address the gender equity problem in high performance sport in New Zealand. That was divided into two main programs. One of them was a residency program where athletes were given jobs within sports, either in coaching or in leadership. And the other was Te Hāpaitanga, which is still going today. It's a really interesting project. For 18 months, up-and-coming female coaches are given the opportunity to have mentors within sports, not necessarily the same sport either. They're brought together in camps to learn off each other, to form new networks. And it's been a really interesting program. So at the beginning of this year, 40% who'd been through that program had retained their roles as coaches. 25% were elevated to a new role, which is exactly what we want to see. But 25% also left New Zealand to coach overseas. So while, international coaching experience is fantastic, the door has to be open back at home for them to return to high-performance coaching here. But at the moment, that door is only open a tiny gap for women to progress through.
So if they want to go and do something brilliant, they've got to do it in places like Japan?
Yeah, in Europe. So 2 women who've been through Te Hāpaitanga went to the Olympics and Paralympics in coaching. One was Natalie Lawrence, who was assistant coach of the Football Ferns, and Elise Fraser, who was coaching paracycling.
For a country that was the first to give women the vote, it doesn't seem that we are at all in the forefront of this particular issue.
No, not at all. Below high performance level, when you look at the coaches, there are a lot of female coaches there. But when athletes receive funding and they are handed over to national coaches, that's where there's the massive drop-off. Just under 30% of women coaching those athletes get to move up to that level. So the question is, how do people in leadership and decision-making positions change the mindset and bring women up to those coaching roles so they can learn from the men who are in them now?
That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. Today's episode was engineered by Jeremy Ansell and produced by Gwen McClure. thanks to Alice Soper and Suzanne McFadden, who spoke to me in spite of losing her voice screaming at the Fast Five netball tournament in Christchurch over the weekend. I'm Alexia Russell. Ka kite anō.